I mean, they do literally take our money without our consent. Literally without it.
I know.
John, I think, has been up for a long time, yeah.
Okay. Use an example of roads as an area where there's potentially a role for government, but you can probably argue it's not an absolute requirement. What about national defense? I mean, we live in a society where technology has got to the point, also justice, both of which got to the point where the complexity is impossible for the individual to oppose, okay? So a long time ago, the farmers could revolt, they could stop the guy coming and taking the land and stuff. Now you can have a singular nuclear sub now could wipe out the entire continent.
Yeah.
100 people to knock out a continent, okay? Okay, why is there not what is the justification for not having national defense? And I can make a similar argument for justice too, where the complexity means the rich people could own the justice system even in a private arbitration.
Defense is one of the best cases. Of course, one thing about technology is, I mean, when you're getting into technological matters, are there technological matters that must be handled by governments? Or could some private bunch of people get together and say, we need a defense against nuclear submarines, let's make one, and they do.
But the possibility of coming out with something that costs maybe $1 trillion, where is the private organization going to come from in realistic power?
$1 trillion, it isn't. Probably yet.
Well, but to develop, right now, the United States is not able to develop a defense against nuclear subs, so.
I'm not sure where this is going, John. So
I'm saying the complexity.
I mean, look. You're saying, A, we have to have government in order to defend ourselves, and B, we can't.
No.
That's not a very helpful. I mean, that doesn't add up.
No, I didn't quite say that. I didn't quite say that. Okay. Right now, they're trying to defend, and basically, right now, the way we defend is mutually assured destruction. Because if the nuclear subs attack us, we'll destroy them. Everyone's dead.
Right.
Which is not a very good defense, but that's the risk. So what I'm saying is, is that not a mandatory role for government? How could any private organization ever hope to oppose Russia if they went rogue, or the United States if they went rogue? How can private citizens ever oppose?
Yeah, but firstly, that's got the ifs in there. Does Russia, in fact, want to attack us? Not as far as we can see.
Can I just make a quick
not
comment?
today, because we have a huge NORAD to defend us.
I mean, you do get into difficult, you do get into sort of imponderables there, but you're depending on the assumption that somebody could see something to gain by mounting, a military invasion against somebody else.
But isn't there a lot of historical precedent for that? I mean, throughout history, people have gone and taken over countries for profit.
That's true.
Now we take over countries to lose money.
They've quote, taken over countries for profit. Have they in fact profited from it? Is another question.
Well, I think sometimes they do, sometimes they lose, right?
Maybe, yes.
But they think that they're profiting. Alexander the Great profited, he conquered the world, he was profiting, right?
It's not surprising that nowadays there is a universal, libertarianism really does apply at the level of nations in one respect. Nowadays, no nation will defend a right to engage in foreign conquest for the sake of gain. No nation will do that. I wonder why not.
I just wanted to say something, which is to say this idea of national defense as a mandatory reason for stealing people's money. I think we're still talking about taking people's money at the point of a gun or an imaginary threat. I mean, we can invent something like a tank the size of the moon that's pointing its gun at Earth, and it's like you
etc. I mean, science fiction we have always with us.
Yeah, I mean that's the problem I have with it.
Yeah. It is. By the way, there's a salutary article which I recommend to everybody. Very easy to find. It's by Randall Holcomb, who's an economist as well. And it's called Government Unnecessary but Inevitable. It's a terrific article. It was published in The Independent a few years ago. And if you can't easily find it, if you just Google Randall Holcomb, you'll probably find your way to it. But if not, I've got it in my website. If you go Google Jan Narveson, go to teaching aids, go to the course called PS 226, and go to the anthology in that. It's called Classics, and Randy's paper is in there. I got it with his permission, by the way, don't worry. It's a great paper, and it's something to worry about. And it says, hey, you guys, we know the government isn't justified. But that's not why we have government. We have government because a bunch of people got together and invaded successfully, right? The government is essentially a gang of thieves, he says. Now the thing is, he has a number of interesting maneuvers in there designed to show that nevertheless some governments can be better than others, and it's in our interest to make the government as good as we can. The big question is, why isn't the outer limit of that to get rid of it altogether? Now, because there are other governments to defend yourself in, is a good answer so long as the others haven't also seen the light. Of course, if they have, then there won't be any other nations to defend yourself against, and that excuse for having a government would also go down the tubes, right? It's a theoretical exercise. That's an answer to that question. Practically speaking, of course, we all know that government is here, and it's going to be here for a long time, and the question is, what can we do? And that's where my test is designed to be useful. I mean, it seems to me we should be able to go on the campaign platforms and say, look, you're paying for the following things. Here's how much you're paying. Here's what you're getting for it. Is that really a deal that makes any sense? And in a whole lot of cases, the answer will pretty clearly, I think, be no, and people just don't think that way. They think they're getting a free lunch. I mean, the number one problem of democratic government is it's so easy for politicians to persuade people that they're getting a free lunch. And it's so difficult to make them see that there really is no such thing as a free lunch, and so that's absurd. I can't think how many otherwise intelligent people I know who haven't said, hey, look, education, it's free. I said, huh? I mean, the average cost of educating a student in the public school systems in North America is considerably higher than the average cost in the average private school in North America. They didn't know that. There's a whole lot of things like that they don't know that maybe it would be useful to mention to them. And I think that's where we should be able to make some gains by saying to people, you're not getting your money's worth. You're getting had.
Jan, if there's a last question, it's got to be a 30-second one.
Sorry. Right.
Why don't we get Walter?
Yeah, he was.
You have a 30-second question?
Can you do the 30 seconds?
Well, I think both of you weren't listening to each other.
Just a comment. When we're paying our taxes, we're paying our
I think that all Lewis was saying is that you could have voluntary sadomasochism.
Yeah.
If a small group of people wanted to kill each other,
Absolutely.
it was all done. And that's what you missed.
Yeah.
And I think what you missed that he was saying is you could have defense agencies. There is a wonderful article by Bob Murphy, Would the Warlords Take Over? Which directly faces the question you make. And also there's something by Ben Powell on Somalia, and he compares Somalia not with the United States or Great Britain, but with other African countries, and he shows that it's doing pretty well there. The only other thing
The cheapest cell phones in the world are in Somalia. 27 different airlines with the lowest fares anywhere.
This is all Ben Powell stuff comparing Somalia with these other countries, and Somalia looks pretty good when you compare it with its neighboring countries, not compared to the U.S.
Yeah.
And one last point that I would make is that democracy is fine if everyone agrees to be bound by the vote.
Right.
Like if you have a chess club, and everyone says, well, should we meet Tuesday or Wednesday, and you have a vote, and you're all bound to agree to the majority, that's innocuous. So there's no problem with that kind of democracy. The problem is democracy when you don't agree to be part of the democracy, and they force you to be in it. That's a different.
That's what I was saying.
Yeah. I mean, that's the classic argument of Thomas Hobbes for government. No government, you're in the state of nature, chaos is worse for everybody. So you have to have government, and if you're going to have government, it should be democratic. I mean, that's the Hobbesian logic.
One last point I want to make. I'm going to be having a debate with Herb Gruber in a couple of weeks on this very subject. It's one of the Libertarian Supper Clubs, so if you're interested, he's a minarchist, I'm an anarchist. I take roughly Jan's point of view. So if you're interested in delving further into this, come to that debate.
By the way, for a quick review of minarchism, there's an article by me called just Minarchism. If you just Google Narveson minarchism, you'll get it. And I think it's fairly entertaining as well as useful.
Also, I have a critique of the Holcomb article, so if anyone likes the Holcomb article,
Good.
I'll show you the refutation of it.
Yeah. Send it to me, Walter, would you?
Okay, would you take